So now we pass on to the next theme, or rather the next perspective from a Muslim perspective. There's not only one Muslim perspective, but this would be one Muslim perspective. We're happy to have with us Dr. Nayla Tabbara, who is one of the founders and directors of the Adyan Center, a remarkable center that works for diversity, solidarity, and human dignity. Dr. Tabbara is also co-president of Religions for Peace. She studied both in Beirut and at the Sorbonne University, sciences of religion, and she works in many different fields as a Muslim theologian, let's say, to put it in one word. I don't know if you would, well, it's a Christian way of saying something. I will just cite one book that she wrote, from 2018, but I don't know how I will translate that. L'Islam pensé par une femme, which is Islam thought out, reflected on, expounded by a woman.
Okay, thank you. Is this working? Thank you. Maybe no, it was working. Hello. Okay, now it's working. Thank you. I would like maybe to explain, add something on my presentation. Thank you for having presented me, but I have two hats in what I work. So one side is Islamic theologian, and I work also in Islamic education. I will give you some examples. And another is as somebody who works on education on diversity, and on religious diversity specifically. So I will try to give you examples of both. But before that, let me just briefly tell you how the situation of education is in Lebanon. So we have the Ministry of Education that has the curriculum, and in some cases, I mean, the curriculum, it has to be one book for everyone, but in most cases and in most topics, it is, we have the curriculum gives the objectives of education in that year, and you have different publishing houses that get a sort of the imprimatur that about their books. So we can have many books, like history books. We have many books of history, which is a bit problematic also, very problematic actually in Lebanon. And like other books where different publishing houses have their own their books, and thus schools use the books that they want, because we have practically half-half between private schools and public schools. So there is a curriculum and a set of books that is followed by public schools, but all the other private schools, they are free to use their own books as long as they match the objectives of the curriculum. Now for religious education is not under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Education. Religious education has been given to religious authorities to decide what they want to teach, whether in public schools, so it's religious authorities that send people to teach Christianity or Islam, or even it depends, like Orthodox Christianity, or Catholic, or Sunni, or Shia, depending on the area of the public school. And sometimes two teachers are sent, if one Christian, one Muslim, if there is a mixture of students. And in private schools, it depends on the school. So we have most of the private schools in Lebanon are denominational schools. So they are either connected to missionary schools, and you have Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, Sunni, Shia, Druze schools. So you have, and in those also, you have different currents. So they all, each one have their own religious education books. Islamically, also what we have among the Shia and the Sunni, some schools are ideological schools. They are linked to political Islam. So it could be linked to close to Muslim Brothers for Sunni or to Hezbollah. So they also have their own religious education. So to understand that it's like a very, very small country, but very big diversity in the education. So what I will be trying to reflect with you is a little bit what we've seen needs to be integrated into education, either religious education or in the curriculum in general, to be something done in parallel with religious education, something more like multi-faith education, education on citizenship and living together. So we thought in our work in Adyan, and with the reflection, of course, with either the Ministry of Education and the Center for Educational Research and Development, or with the religious institutions, to think what we can add from the religious education or from education in general, to add to, for example, civic education, or to add something as non-formal education. So what we've realized is our students in the regular education, generally, don't learn enough about the other. We are a country that is, I mean, very proud of its diversity. We are very proud that we are the only country in the whole area that in its constitution is not linked to a religion. Our constitution says Lebanon honors God the Most High. And it's not related to any religion, so it opens up to diversity, at least to acceptance of diversity of monotheistic religions, which is reductionist, but at least it opens at least not the link with one religion. So we pride ourselves to have that, yet because our curriculum was done after the war, the position of those who wrote the curriculum was, we will not talk about diversity so as not to create problems, because during the war the problems were related to our denominations. So we found out from a study of our curriculum that the names used, for example, in our curriculum in our books, sorry, are names that are neutral. So I generally joke that most of Lebanon is called George, Joseph, Muhammad, or Ali, or for guys, but those names are not in our books. The names used in our books are names that don't give any religious connotation. So diversity is something we talk about all the time. Lebanon, the country of diversity, Pope John Paul II, Lebanon, the message. But in reality, in our books, it's not present. Religious feasts concerning each other. Lebanon is a country where we have a lot of holidays, because we need to balance between all the religious denominations. So all have to have their shares of holidays. But these holidays are not explained in our curriculum. So our students don't know. If they are Christian, they don't know what the Muslims are actually feasting. What's that holiday that we're stopping for, and vice versa. Or people generally have wrong information that they get from their homes. So there is a lack, so just to give you like briefly two examples, there is a lack in the general education about diversity and about the other. Religious education, definitely. The other is not present. Not present at all. And it's not only that the other is not present, but the common space, the civic space is not present. I am learning in my religious education, whether Christian or Muslim, how to deal with God and how to deal with my fellow Christian or Muslim. If I'm a Muslim, how to deal with my fellow Muslim friend, and if I'm a Christian, how to deal with my fellow Christians. I'm not learning about others. The other is not present. So, not present in the education general education, not present in religious education, but we are in a country of post-war, and we have a lot of stereotypical images, a lot of wrong information that we receive in our homes and in our media and about others. So we end up having fear, wrong images, wrong understanding about the other. So for us, what we thought we need to do is first try to integrate those two aspects in religious education. Mentioning the other, but also mentioning the public space. In the sense that what we call, and maybe this would remind of maybe Tikkun Olam, we call it religious social responsibility. To include in education, in religious education, the fact that as religions, we're not supposed to be, or as religious people, as part of our faith, we're not supposed to be working only for the people from our faith. If we want to do good, we need to be doing good for the whole of society. If we are responsible, we are responsible for the common good. So to include that in the religious education. So what we've done was work with the different religious institutions in Lebanon. I worked with the Islamic religious institutions, the Sunni, Shia, and Druze. And then we had another group that worked on the Catholic, Orthodox, and Protestant also education to present to religious teachers extra material that they can integrate in their religious teaching, and that would be on values that we call for religious social responsibility. I will give you the example of those values: human dignity, acceptance of the other, trust. Actually, trust is not the correct, it's responsibility actually. Justice, respect of laws and covenants, forgiveness, and working for the common good. So we made example of classrooms to be given by religious teachers, for Muslims aside, for Christians aside, on those topics, exercises and related to the religious texts from each of the religions. So for several age groups to be integrated into the religious education. And what is interesting is that, for example, I was working with a Muslim group. Although there was one class about acceptance of the other, they made into each exercise about each other topic, like human dignity or justice, they would talk, they integrated the other. So they would say, well, yes, my friend George did this, how do I react to it? And so they really took it in to understand that we need to add this into religious education. Another thing that we're actually finalizing now is on the level of higher Islamic education also. Since 2011 in the Islamic world, we've been having documents that are very new in what they contain as topics. And from instances or Islamic instances that have a representativity worldwide, like for example Al-Azhar in Egypt. Since 2011, it had a document on the future of Egypt where it talked about democracy. And then 2012, a document that talked about freedoms, including religious freedom. Then came other documents, especially 2017, that talked about citizenship and equality. And this one mainly focused on equality between Christians and Muslims. And for the first time, we were seeing in those documents that Christians are called by the name that they want to be called with, not by the names that Muslims used to call them, which is Nasara. No, they are called Masihiyin, which is the name that they want to be called by. So we have a shift on the level of those texts and on the level of those documents. We had never heard from Islamic authorities these terms and these principles: citizenship, coexistence, religious freedom, equality. They're very new in a way, and it's amazing to have them on the level of texts. But the problem is that they are on the level of texts. They have helped us. I think these are the texts that helped reach the human fraternity document from the Islamic side, because they were like preparation to be able to have that text, but they don't yet have the incidents top down, so they are not yet in the education. So we thought, because we have already in Adyan the methodology, we've been working with a group of Muslim theologians and thinkers, and among which Professor Adnan Mokrani with us here, on a set of values also to be explained from a faith-based perspective, but they are also values that help in religious social responsibility. So here we have humanism, or Islamic humanism, dialogue, pluralism, nonviolence, the common good, mercy, justice, and gender justice as an example, and freedom, including freedom of religion, and aesthetic sense also. We thought that would be interesting for values of public life. And this is finalized now and will be published very soon to be put in the hands of institutes of higher Islamic learning to include in religious education. So it's faith-based educations on those values that help us in living together. So they include at the same time diversity, but also those values of public life. Do I still have? Okay. So just to give you also an example of something else that we've included in education, but here not for religious education, but on the it comes in the regular education, and this is education on citizenship and diversity. I talk about them because they're among the best practices that can be replicated anywhere in the world, I think. One project is called Alwan, which means colors, sorry, and it's for grades for ages 15 and 16. So there are youth that take this program after class, and they start by issues related to identity. So identity dynamics are very important to resolve. And before we try to learn about the other, we need to learn also about how we define ourselves and what are the barriers we put between us and others. So identity is very important. And then they learn also about all the barriers that we put, which are our stereotypical images of others, prejudices, to be able to start building nonviolent communication with others and accept their own identity. Because we have a tendency sometimes of youth who say, I don't want to say who I am, and I don't want to talk about my identity because they have suffered from being labeled from their identity. So how to be able to know who I am, where I come from, recognize any cultural or religious identity or philosophical identity, and yet be open to the others. This is the balance that we try to make. And then they meet others from other schools, and they do projects of community service together, after also having learned about each other. It's very important for us, for example, that they learn texts. So they learn, for example, Our Father and the Fatiha, the Islamic, and they compare them. And but we don't get them to go and do the practices of each other. So it's a very thin line. You learn in the sense of you study them, you compare them, you go to a mosque, you go to a church, but no one should be asked to perform a ritual of the other. We respect the sanctity of the ritual of each one, but we can share and understand and learn. So this is one project. Based on that and the demand of schools that we need to start earlier, we have developed a new project for 9-year-olds, because this is the time where they are learning most about their religion, because they are close to being recognized as religiously responsible, let's say. So it's like Islamically religiously responsible, the first communion. And so this is a program that contains introduction to world religions through games, but also through artistic sense, and also to values of empathy, of solidarity. Our aim from this project is that first, that like the first project, is that they learn how to balance between their own belonging and opening up to others. So my belonging doesn't necessarily mean that I need to be afraid of the other. There is a fear instilled in our kids. Some Muslims, for example, fear seeing a cross or passing next to a church. Yes, we have that in some circles. So, for example, I have a friend who's a sheikh who's responsible of Islamic education in one school. He made it on purpose to add the image of a church inside the Islamic education books, so that the children get used to see a church and think that it is a house of worship. So because in some circles there is this fear. So we need to take out that fear and to get them to accept. And there's another fear, is the fear of talking about religion or of asking questions. One of my favorite exercises with all ages is to ask persons from another religion questions, and then realize how their questions are formulated. And because mostly our questions are, why aren't you like me? Questions. Or I want to insist on the stereotypical images that I have about the others. So why do you Muslims beat your wives? It's like, I know that you do, so why? so that is, and the last, objective of this project is to have the children, as of 9 years old, refuse any form of discrimination that happens, and teach their parents that. So, yeah, I will stop here. Thank you.
I was going to say that we're going to give priority to the public this time for the questions, but we'll have other moments of exchange. Yeah. Keep it for this afternoon, yeah. Thank you so much for this very precise presentation with a lot of concrete examples, and we feel that there's a real experience behind. So this is helpful. I'll just underline two aspects, is that the post-war situation may not be the case everywhere, but a traumatic situation in our relations and religious relations is almost everywhere. So this is an important thing to keep in mind. And also, I really like those two principles, the opening to the other from a religious point of view, but also to the common ground, the civic ground, the citizenship dimension. Yeah. So, as I said, we'll give priority to one, maximum two questions from the audience, from the public. J'avais dit priorité au public.
D'accord.
Le pizza.
I think everybody's hungry.
So has just
Doctor,
one.
I just
In
want
Italy,
doctorate,
in Italy,
yeah.
okay.
Okay, it just so resonates the experience I have in Israel. And I want to have two remarks and then a question. Talking about the things that unite us and not the things that are different, there's something very dangerous about it because you eliminate the other. And I saw that in the research I did about education unit in the Israeli army. We have an education unit where they used to take soldiers to learn about other religions as part of the military service. They have a tour, they visit the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, they talk about Islam. But lately, they erased this part of the program because it's too diverse. It leads to diversity among the soldiers because other religions are controversial. Now, even if they would have tours and they would say stereotypical things about the religion, it's better than ignoring the other religions. So this is something really, really dangerous, I find it. I definitely agree with that. And we also did a research about the appearance of crosses in Israeli textbook. You will not find a cross. You have one textbook with the picture of the crucifixion. That is okay because it's a kind of historical scene, but not a cross as a symbol. And also the use of the name. In Hebrew, you can use Yeshu or Yeshua. Yeshu is a abbreviation of the English or French Jesus. And in Hebrew, it has horrible acronym that was used by Jews for many years. But it should be said Yeshua. That's the real name. The root of the name emphasized the idea of salvation, Yeshua. And there's a big issue about calling him Jesus or Yeshu or Yeshua. And I insist on Yeshua, and I see my students sit in class like, shall I say Yeshua or Yeshu? And some of them just say Jesus because it's neutral. So choosing the word, accepting the word that the other want to be called is so meaningful. And with stereotype, last example, and then I'm coming to my question. I brought a Christian Palestinian to meet with my students from Israel, Israeli citizen, and they kept asking her, how come she doesn't have a hijab? And we kept saying, she's a Christian, she's not. But for them, Arab, Palestinian, Islam, hijab. So stereotypes, it's so hard to break them. Getting to my question, being a woman in the Middle East, I'm familiar with the sensitivities and talking with religious institution that's supposed to teach religion. Does it have an impact? What's the challenges? Maybe can you elaborate a bit about that, about gender issues, being a woman being involved with Muslim institutions?
Thank you. Thank you for bringing up, thank you for all that you've said, and of insisting that it is very dangerous to only teach commonalities. We need to teach difference, and we need to teach difference within. Even for the little kids, we need to start teaching them the difference within the same religion. Also, not only difference between different sects, like Sunni, Shia, Druze, but we need to also teach them the difference of interpretation within each sect, because there's a lot of that, and we need them to get used to that since they are kids. Our problem, I think, worldwide is that people are becoming more and more simplistic, and we need to instill that in them since they are kids. I had another point that I forgot. Okay. The second thing is, of course, we need also to face the fact that we have ambiguous perceptions of each other and also of women, of the status of women. The problem is that sometimes we say things like in Islamic general discourse, we tend to have that discourse where we say that, well, yes, Islam recognized Christianity, Judaism, Sabaeanism. We are very inclusive. Mary has been quoted so many times in the Quran. Yet, we disregard all the other social implications and historical implications that have happened. We disregard the fact that, well, yes, but if we have an Islamic state, Christians and Jews and all others will become second-rate citizens. So we just talk about the nice parts and we disregard all the problematic parts as long as we're not living them now. Or even if we are, we just sometimes just talk about texts and beautiful things, but So this is something we need to face. We need to face that we have an ambiguity in the perception that we have about the other, and the same about women, because also we have beautiful texts that talk about equality of man and woman, and but at the same time we have laws that are very much detrimental to women, especially personal status laws related to an interpretation of the religious text. So also here we need to recognize that we have that we have that problem. This sadly has not been recognized. This is why we wanted to include it in higher education. Even, for example, when we are teaching little kids, we had, while I was training the teachers, let's say, I had a reaction concerning the veil, the hijab, because we were showing them the different way of wearing of nuns, priests, Christian and Muslim girls, and we showed a picture of the hijab, but we didn't want to be stereotypical. I'm a Muslim, I'm not veiled. So to say that you can be veiled as a Muslim, well, at the same time you can, so there are Muslim women who are veiled and there are Muslim women who are not veiled. And we had to explain to the teachers that here we are not giving a religious text that is saying what should be done and what should not be done. Here we are saying this is a teaching on diversity, showing the diversity that is on the ground for the students to recognize when they see that a veiled woman, this is a Muslim woman or could be a Muslim woman, and a non-veiled woman could be also either Christian or Muslim when they meet her.
Thank you. This is a very important theme that we may have to or want to continue this afternoon.
So our last speaker for this morning, as you say in Italian, coraggio, courage. We have to gather our energy for this final moment. And I also have to gather my courage to try to pronounce your name correctly. So we're happy to have Reverend Wimalarathana Thero. I hope it's at least understandable. Reverend is originally from Sri Lanka, where he was ordained a Buddhist monk, and he was also abbot of a Buddhist temple in Sri Lanka, and is now in Geneva, where he is, he teaches Buddhist philosophy. He's also president of the International Buddhist Foundation, which has its headquarters in Geneva. And chief incumbent of the Geneva Buddhist Vihara, which is the Buddhist center of Geneva. He's also representative to the United Nations organization, and so we're very honored to have him with us.
Thank you. Venerable sirs, dear ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to be here. Thank you very much for your great invitation to represent this great opportunity. Here we are discussing about the approach of the education to find peace, the fraternal humanity, how to construct this society. I understand that you are fed up with spending many times listening different speech, but with so many informations, very useful. How to find the inner peace by the way of using our religious teachings. According to all our understanding, all religious teachers never taught about a religion. Jesus Christ never taught about Christianity or Catholic. Buddha never taught about Buddhism. In the same way, always try to find peace within our context, what you have developed. I feel great joy to participate in this noble initiative by His Holiness Pope Francis to reinvent the global compact on education. His dedication to foster more open and conclusive education, including patient listening, constructive dialogue, and better mutual understanding for all our young people is admirable. His approach to do this through universal brotherhood. The Buddha's teaching from 2600 years ago places a central role on universal brotherhood. Our connectedness to all our living things, to each other, and common feelings of friendship and mutual support is fundamental to the life of a Buddhist priest or layperson. It is manifested through the 4 divine abodes or emotions that the Buddha advised us to dwell in. He advised that we live in or live by these 4. Buddhism and strategies for universal brotherhood. The first divine abode or emotion is loving kindness or metta. The ability to feel connected enough to another person or any living beings for that matter with goodwill and thoughts of non-harm. This creates a feeling deep connectedness that is a basic human need. It is as essential to the development of children and young people and for the growth of adults as is food and water. It is just not limited to acts of kindness, but is a viewpoint and perspective that must permeate all that we think, say, and do in relation to ourselves and others. It is enriching both the person who shows the kindness and the person who receives it. It should not be confused with its selfish attachment. It is selfless, it is the timeless, the most powerful antidote to anger, hatred, and cruelty. The second is compassion or karuna, the quality of human heart to be moved when witnessing the suffering of others. This is what across belief system spurs us to lend a helping hand to acknowledge and alleviate the suffering of others. It is not the same as pity, which puts you on a higher pedestal than others. It is helped by empathy, the ability to put yourself in the shoes and the lives of others and understand their suffering from their point of view without judgment. This is the antidote to cruelty and selfishness. The third divine abode where Buddhists are advised to dwell is sympathetic joy or mudita. This is the ability to be truly happy for the fortune, luck, success, and happiness of others with no comparison with oneself. It is the only antidote to jealousy, resentment, and egocentrism, and all the terrible things that lead from them. The fourth divine abode is the quality of equanimity. This means keeping a balanced mind and to be able to face anything life throws at you with equal calm. The Buddha recognized that everyone is subject to 4 pairs of opposing vicissitudes in life: pleasure and pain, praise and blame, ill repute and fame, and loss and gain. Everyone who is alive faces these in different combinations. As the true nature of life constant change, everyone will experience these 8 conditions repeatedly. Therefore, learning to have equanimity is a wise and useful way to face life. It should not be confused with indifferences. It is the antidote to clinging the attachment. These 4 divine abodes are really 4 timeless, universal human emotional states that can create universal brotherhood towards the positive and wise goals that humanity sets for itself. In this instance, we can use these same 4 to create and drive a new way to educate our children and youth. But we adults must first enter these divine abodes ourselves. The state of the world. The world is changing at an unprecedented pace. Modern transport, communication technology, the internet, social media technology, the globalized economy and market forces connected us externally. About 4.5 million travel the world by planes every day. That's 1.6 billion people in a year taking a plane connecting them with people in different countries. Nearly 5 billion people have a mobile phone today on our planet. We have never been so more connected, and we have never been so alone. Our suffering has not ended. It has just shifted from one experience to another. But more people have access to a mobile phone than they do a clean or safe toilet. Suffering continues despite our material advances, and inequity, the gap between the very rich and very poor, is growing every day, even in the richest countries. Today, economic prosperity means we live longer, but we are not living healthier lives. Millions of old people live out their last years alone and frightened. Adults in the economically productive age struggle to live modern life, spending their hard-earned money on things that will not make them happy. The nuclear family means more independence, and yet we know we all crave independence and connectedness. The village that it takes to raise a child, as the African proverb says, is no more. The World Health Organization estimates that more than 300 million people on our planet have depression. 41 million people around the world die of non-communicable diseases caused in part by modern lifestyle choices of unhealthy diet, lack of physical exercise, tobacco, and harmful use of alcohol. Let's look at one health issue that speaks to how we lost our sense of brotherhood and humanity. Childhood obesity is on the rise. It is linked to negative mental health conditions, isolation, bullying, depression, self-harm, and lack of self-confidence, amongst others, and is a contributor to cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, and respiratory disease. The number of obese children and adolescents. The age 5 to 19 years worldwide has risen tenfold in the past four decades. Combined, the number of obese children 5 to 19 years old rose more than tenfold globally. In 1975, there were 11 million obese children in the world. This rose in 124 million in 2016. And in addition, 213 million were overweight in 2016. How does this relate to universal brotherhood? It's actually quite simple. We do not seem to care in this modern market economy, and private sector is producing and marketing food and is harmful to children. Parents are too busy to spend time looking after their children. As a result, children are exposed through their day to advertising of harmful foods and other substances through television, the internet, and other means. The tobacco industry actively targets children to take up smoking so that they can have new customers of their lethal product to replace the customers who die of smoking. The same is done by the alcohol industry, who has allowed this to happen. If we are honest, we will see that we have in one way or another neglected the nurturing of our children and societies as we live in the rat race of modern life. Modern education matches modern values. Those values mostly focus on material success and excess. We want our children to focus only on academic success, to be rich, to be beautiful, and conform to modern unrealistic standards for external beauty, to be famous when they grow up. Anyone who cannot make these impossible stands is some way or another made to feel like a less person. Life is in the 21st century is centered around our egos. Market forces stroke our egos in its relentless pursuit to create customers who will buy their products. Politicians promise us change for the better in exchange for our vote. Both these forces build our ego and diminish our humanity and sense of connectedness. The four divine abodes become harder and harder to find. In the past few centuries, we have put all our efforts and ingenuity to conquer the world and how we are exploring outer space. Our actions over consumption, greed, and sense of entitlement has brought our planet to the brink of collapse. All our efforts and results have been about the exploration and domination of the external world. We have in the process neglected the most important exploration of all our inner worlds, our minds, for it is inside us that humanity, wisdom, potential, and all our best qualities lie. Buddhism as a teaching for all. If we were to sum up Buddhism in one sentence, it is this: Buddhism means the exploration of our inner selves, our minds, in order to find true peace and happiness. The Buddha is acknowledged around the ancient and the modern world not as a religious teacher leading, but as a great teacher whose teachings have withstood the test of time. We Buddhists refer to him as the unsurpassed teacher. The UN passed a resolution in 2019 to recognize the Buddha, recognize the birth, enlightenment, and the passing away of the Buddha on the full moon day of May every year. This UN day is called Vesak Day and recognizing Buddha as a teacher whose teachings contributes to inner peace and world peace. This is why the teachings of the Buddha can be applied across all religions, across all humanity, for all ages, for the rest of time. The Four Noble Truths. The Buddha's teaching does not require beliefs and instead of invited and every person to investigate for him or herself before developing confidence in it. This approach itself is one we can use to create a new system of education for our children. The estimates 84,000 pieces of teachings of the Buddha codified into a set of 3 baskets called Tripitaka are all based on the Four Noble Truths regarding the human conditions. In this tradition of his time, in the Ganga's valley 26 centuries ago, he posed them as physical doctor would. The first truth is the diagnosis. He observed that life is permeated with dissatisfaction, discontent, unhappiness, and suffering. The second truth is about underlying cause. He examined the cause of suffering and linked it to our habit of attachment and clinging to ideas and things that are all essentially ever-changing and transient. The third truth is about the prognosis. This suffering can be ended or cured. The fourth truth is about the treatment. He prescribed the Eight Noble Fold Path, 8 ways of living and practices that would lead to an end of suffering. This include the 8 view, the right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. I don't want to take the time to describe. Okay. All these eightfold path can be concluded into 3 categories. It's called Sila, Samadhi, Prajna. Sila, that means the discipline. Samadhi means concentration. Prajna means wisdom. By the way of training this lifestyle, one can reach to goal to find inner peace. Buddhism is a golden age. Modern neuroscience, behavioral science, psychology, medicine, and physiology are all generating mountains of evidence that support the teachings of Buddha and the advice he gave humanity. Human experience is underscoring many other Buddhist concepts, including the need to avoid extremes of deprivation and indulgence in the path to developing the person. The central belief that most people have their ego, and we perpetuate through the education of our children as a permanent, unchanging entity, has caused much suffering in the world. When we believe this, we are attached to our views, our lives, our views and perceptions, our property, and what we consider is our loved ones. In such a state, when we perceive a threat to any of these, however unreal or imagined, we respond through greater attachment, more anger, and endless delusion. With such confused minds, we are created in ourselves and others fear, suffering, unhappiness, illness, violence, war, and destruction. This is the cycle that the new compact of education must break. What should replace it? I see a values-based universal education for children. Values of universality, interconnectedness, interdependence, brotherhood, harmlessness, peace, and inner growth must frame the new education system. We have to help children to see beyond many divisions of race, color, gender, nationality, political views, and other prisons that keep us from being universal creatures and that keep us in internal and external conflict. Children must be encouraged and supported to reflect as a natural habit and to help them exploring the world inside, not just outside. I believe the four divine abodes advised by the Buddha of loving kindness, compassion, joy for others, and equanimity are universal values we must integrate into our children's upbringing and education. Children must learn consequences, good and bad, not punishment, so that they can choose to do the right thing and not to be forced to do it. We must help children appreciate another living beings and environment, the diminished resources that are a direct result of either our collective greed, our inattention. But most importantly, we must change ourselves. We must start to set an example by examining ourselves and starting our inner journey in whatever manner or form that is part of your belief system. Children will do as we do. They will not do as we say. We can and should take every effort to create and sustain a new human education system that allows every child to achieve her or his goal potential. When that happens, we will be nurturing a generation of super kids who are not only intelligent but also wise, kind, and a true universal human. Thank you very much. Wish you all the best.
Thank you for concluding this morning with this idea of the super kid that is intelligent and wise. I think this is a very good conclusion. We won't have time for questions right now, which is a bit of a pity because there are things that would be interesting to question. I think you've brought us a lot about values that from Buddhism can be spread out. I would have a question about what is the image of the other inside of Buddhism, but this may be for this afternoon. And maybe we can keep for ourselves this idea. I don't know if it's mudit? The question, joy, sympathetic joy for the success of the other. That would be a fantastic gift for each one of us to receive. Yeah. Father Bazanes will conclude.
Concludo dicendo grazie di nuovo di cuore per tutti questi contributi che potrete avere accesso direttamente agli iscritti dopo la pubblicazione, perché abbiamo tagliato molte cose per questi contributi molto interessanti. Semplicemente ci ritroviamo quindi alle 5, siete puntuali per poter terminare anche puntualmente alle 7.